Hi, welcome back. Sebastian here. So power ranking time today. So power rankings for the 2023 Formula One Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So as always, this looks at performance the last several races and tries to look at how I think the driver did that so far the last couple weekends. Not really taking into account things like bad luck and mechanical reliability. So, 20th place, dropping 1 place from last ranking, is Nick DeVries. So for DeVries, I think really poor weekend overall. Obviously crashed in qualifying and then crashed in the main race yesterday. I think he's still learning his feet. I think compared to the other two rookies on the grid, Piastri and Sargent, he probably has the least amount of leash, both because he's the most experienced rookie and the oldest rookie on the grid in terms of experience in motorsport in general. But he's also at AlphaTauri, and Red Bull has lots of young drivers that I think they could put in that car if they wanted to. I don't think that we're going to see a change mid-season, although I think it's becoming increasingly likely to me that DeVries will be a one and done, and that he will probably be replaced at the end of the year. So overall, not great for DeVries. 19th, moving up one spot, is Logan Sargent. So for Sargent, not the worst weekends, but not the best weekend either. Crashed in sprint qualifying, couldn't participate in the sprint race. Qualifying yesterday was a bit better. Qualifying on Friday was a bit better. He did have, he was in Q2 for the first time, so that's a good improvement, a good milestone for him. But it was a pretty lonely race. He was pretty much at the back the whole time and was quite a few positions behind his teammate Albon. So number 18, same spot as last race, is Valtteri Bottas. So for Bottas, High Point gets to out-qualify his teammate Joe, but barely. And then in the sprint race, I honestly don't even remember what happened to him. He was basically not particularly noticeable. And then in the race yesterday, I think he had a very unfortunate incident on the first lap, which probably set him back quite a bit through the race. But then again, was one of only two drivers to try to use the two-stop strategy on the hards, and he was the last finished classified driver. Number 17, same spot as last time, is Kevin Magnussen. So for Magnussen, still having qualifying struggles. I think this time though, it was because of issues with the car that he was out-qualified by his teammate. The race was a bit better. He looked like he was having some good battles. But again, with those teams in the lower midfield, it's really hard to say. So then again, Kevin Magnussen, 17th. Number 16th, I think, having a pretty wretched weekend overall as a team, but this driver in particular I think was not great either, was Esteban Ocon. So obviously had that engine issue that they were worried that the team were worried that his car had in practice. So he had very limited running. Qualifying gets to Q2, out-qualifies his teammate, and then in the sprint, started from the pit lane, and then the race started from the pit lane as well, so he was really not able to do much. He and Hulkenberg capitalized on the safety car and staying out on the hard tires, but really, I think the points were never really on the cards. It was just kind of artificially looked like that based on the strategy that they were doing. Number 15th, a bit of a scruffy weekend again, same place as last time, is Carlos Sainz. So all three, even though he did finish in 5th place in the Grand Prix, he was out-qualified by about 8/10 by his teammate Leclerc, and he's never really looked comfortable at all this weekend. He's had lots of scruffy moments going down escape roads during practice or qualifying, and he's been quite comfortably off his teammate's pace. So I think 15th is a pretty good spot for Sainz. Number 14th is Nico Hulkenberg, same place as last weekend. His last driver in his train of pack of drivers who are all in the same position as last race. Hulkenberg, I don't know, there's not really a whole lot to say. He was obviously the second driver in that train, so he was kind of higher up than he probably should have been based on the strategy that he was on. He had that bit of a moment in the wall, but sprint and sprint race were nothing special really. I think he obviously it seems like they went with the wrong setup in the qualifying and the sprint, which is why they decided to start from the pit lane. So there you go, Hulkenberg 14th. Number 13, I think, probably having the worst weekend overall this weekend, dropping down 6 spots from last race, is Pierre Gasly. So for Pierre Gasly, Obviously, the issue started with the engine failure issue, engine issue in practice, which really hurt him going forward. But that being said, he still made that really big mistake in qualifying, and then basically started 19th, qualified 19th in the sprint qualifying, so the sprint race was a complete write-off as well. And in the Grand Prix, was one of two drivers to go on the hurt two-stop strategy. Had some nice overtakes, but again, still finished very low down. I think finished below where that car should have been this weekend. Number 12, moving up one position, is Guan Yu Zhou. So for Zhou, I think a pretty solid weekend. Was out-qualified by Bottas in the main qualifying, out-qualified him in the sprint qualifying, and was having some nice battles, was ahead of his teammate quite comfortably in the race until that mechanical DNF. So similar situation of Zhou last year, probably had PTSD from how many times he had mechanical issues in the race last year. So moving up one spot, again in 11th, is Oscar Piastri. So a pretty solid race for Piastri. I think of the three rookies, he was the only one who did not put it in the wall at some point in the weekend. So I think that's great for him. And of course, I'm trying to think, 21. Oh yeah, 2021. I can't remember. I don't think they were at Baku 2021. It might have been his first experience at the track too. But nonetheless, Piastri, I think he was a bit off his teammate, but still was pretty good. Was one place outside the points as well. Number 10. So moving into the top 10, in the same spot is Lance Stroll. So for Stroll, a bit of a not great weekend. I think some of that shine from the start of the year and kind of getting those really good results with the hand injury is starting to wear off. I think if he continues like this next weekend, I think he'll start to drop down the order quite a bit in my power rankings. He qualified 9th in both the sprint and the qualifying. He was hurt with the DRS issue that the team was suffering from, so I think qualifying I can give him a bit of a pass given how much time he lost with the team think he lost with that DRS issue. Sprint was okay. He managed to get a solitary point, 8th place. I think that's pretty good. And then 7th in the Grand Prix, made some really nice overtakes at the start and at the safety car restart to get ahead of Russell, as well as passing Tsunoda and Norris. So those parts of the race were good. I think the race pace, tire management wasn't as good. He was lucky to get away with a mistake that he made at the same corner where De Vries retired, and of course made that mistake at the last corner, which allowed Hamilton to overtake him. So not fantastic from Stroll, but again, still stays ahead of Russell, which is probably really the main aim, staying ahead of the number 2 driver for both Ferrari and Mercedes if you can. Number 9, moving up 2 positions, pretty solid weekend overall, was Alex Albon. So for Albon, was a bit unlucky not to get points in the sprint, finished in 9th. The race yesterday was a bit more iffy. He started, I think, in 12th place. I think that Williams' team doesn't really have the race pace yet to fight with the teams a bit around them, like the McLaren, the Alpine. But nonetheless, I think still really solid effort by Albon this weekend. Number 8, moving up one position, is Lando Norris. So for Norris, points again this weekend. I think really got the most out of the car, was best of the rest, I guess, in the race. And I got that really nice qualifying to qualify 7th for the main Grand Prix. I think benefiting from the issues for both Russell and for Stroll. But nonetheless, really solid weekend overall and getting the most out of the car, I think. Number 7, dropping 4 positions from last race, is George Russell. So for Russell, I think it was really a race of 2 halves. The main part of the race, I think, the main part of the weekend was a bit of a struggle. Qualified 11th, probably should have gone into Q3, I think, based on the strength of the car and where Hamilton qualified. And then in the race, was lucky to get ahead of both Stroll and Hamilton through the safety car period, and then was basically overtaken by both of them. So not great by Russell, and then never really looked on for a move on Stroll after that. Of course, got fastest lap, but still not great overall for Russell this weekend. And of course, in the sprint, sprint qualifying was much better, and sprint was pretty good as well. But then again, I think I put a lot more emphasis on the main Grand Prix. So moving down 4 spots for George Russell. Number 6, in the same position as last race, is Yuki Tsunoda. So for Tsunoda, really excellent result, I thought. Got points in the AlphaTauri, which I think is really all that the team can ask for. Of course, had a bit of a scruffy moment in the sprint race. Was hindered by the red flag in the sprint qualifying, but nonetheless, I think the main qualifying was absolutely fantastic. Qualifying 8th in the AlphaTauri, and then getting finishing 9th, I think was the most he could have done. So really fantastic for Tsunoda. And I think he may be the difference that for the team that helps them finish ahead of the Williams. And let's see, who else are they fighting? Yeah, Alpine, Haas, and Alfa Romeo. So, I think Tsunoda has the potential to maybe be that difference maker to help them fight in the Constructors' Championship, whereas the teams around them may be struggling a bit, especially while De Vries is still struggling. Okay, number 5, moving up 3 positions from last race is Charles Leclerc. So for Leclerc, almost perfect weekend, I thought. Gets pole in both qualifying and the sprint qualifying. I think the Red Bull were probably the faster car, marginally, but Leclerc was able to get the most out of it and got pole. I think the race, he was, I think, very fortunate to beat Verstappen in the sprint race. Of course, Verstappen dealing with that damage from that contact with Russell, but still, beating a Red Bull is still a massive achievement for the Ferrari. And I think in the race, he basically was most comfortable, best driver from those teams in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So really fantastic weekend for Leclerc. Number 4, moving up 1 position, is Lewis Hamilton. So for Hamilton, really solid race, I thought. He had a good, pretty good qualifying and a really good race. Sorry about that, yeah. So Hamilton, really good result, I thought. So yeah, out-qualified his teammate Russell in the qualifying. And then the race, I think, had to overtake him after being hurt by the safety car. So I thought Hamilton had a really fantastic race overall. Sprint race wasn't as good for Hamilton, but still a pretty good weekend overall, I thought. Number 3, moving up 1 position, is Sergio Perez. So for Perez, honestly, I think the sprint race and the sprint qualifying was more impressive than the main race and the main qualifying, even though he did end up getting the win in the race. I think he was quite fortunate to capitalize on the safety car, plus whatever reason Red Bull decided to pit Verstappen as early as he did before the safety car came out. But nonetheless, he did hold on to that position and basically was able to go fast enough that Verstappen wasn't able to come up right behind him with DRS and potentially attack. So really excellent overall, I thought, for Sergio Perez. So number 2, dropping 1 position, first time not first place in my power rankings, is Max Verstappen. So Verstappen, not a fantastic weekend overall, I thought. Main qualifying, didn't get pole, did out-qualify his teammates. Sprint qualifying was out-qualified by both Leclerc and Perez. Sprint race, I think, with that damage, I think, finishing 3rd place is reasonable. But then again, I think he maybe could have been a bit less aggressive with that move on trying to defend that move from Russell. But then again, I think it was probably like 60-40 on Russell, that move. In the main Grand Prix, everything looked really under control for Verstappen until the safety car came out. I think, maybe on a more traditional track, not a street circuit that Perez does really well at, Verstappen probably would have come right up to the back of him and challenged for that win. But yeah, so an okay weekend for Verstappen, but not great. So number 1, moving up 1 position, first time in first place in my power rankings, is Fernando Alonso. So for Alonso, really solid weekend overall. Finished his 4th. Given that Aston Martin thought this weekend was probably going to be one of the worst weekends on the calendar, given that there's a really long straight and their car is still quite draggy, I thought he did really well. The qualifying, I know, was hindered by the DRS issues that both cars had, so I'm kind of giving him a pass. He, of course, did out-qualify his teammate for the 4th time this year, so again, really good in qualifying. In the race, and I think he kind of just schooled Stroll in terms of race pace. Made that really clever move on Sainz as well to get up to 4th, and looked like he maybe had an outside chance of getting Leclerc at the end. So really fantastic overall for Alonso, and a really fantastic start to his career at Aston Martin. So that's all for my power rankings for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.